All right, so let's talk about YouTube defaulting video playback to 480p because that is a pretty bizarre thing for them to do, at least in normal times. So there are users that have been reporting in Europe as of last week that YouTube has been defaulting them to 480p, not even regular HD resolution. And now that change is being rolled out globally. So we actually had a handful of people at the office notice it today. Actually, I believe it's, yeah, Alex is the one who posted this in the WAN Show doc. But there's actually a very reasonable explanation for all of this. Luke, would you consider dropping down Floatplane's default video quality in this time, and why?
I don't think we're gonna quite have the impact
Self-own right here.
that
Right
they
here. Here
do.
comes the self-own.
Like YouTube turning down their default playback would result in a very large amount of users that aren't going to bother click a button to change video quality, which is maybe not of the people watching this stream right now, but is probably a relatively large
Yeah,
group of people that watch YouTube. It's going to result in them sucking up a lot less of the world's bandwidth, especially when
right.
everyone is stuck at home. And
And especially
this
when they're
will like
Philistines and wouldn't have appreciated it anyway.
yeah, yeah. And it's this will actually very likely make a noticeable decrease on the internet usage of the world, which is crazy. And Flowplane would not be in the same category at all. So I don't think we're too worried about it. It's probably fine.
But that does lead us into why YouTube would do this. So the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a massive uptick in global internet usage for a variety of reasons. So number one is that people are stuck at home with nothing to do. So what are they doing? They're going on Netflix, they're gaming, they're watching Twitch streams. They're playing. Didn't Steam log their most ever users online, and that was without any kind of crazy launch. That was before the Half-Life Alyx launch. That was, I mean, what Doom Eternal was coming out around that time, but and like there were a lot of people playing it, but what was it like 20 million concurrents or something stupid like that?
And if I remember correctly, even just like Counter-Strike itself had like the most users it's ever had, which
And it's
is
not like there's
kind
been
of
a crazy
nuts.
big tournament in the last, week or something that's been, oh yeah, I need to go play CS:GO again or anything like that. Just
Yeah.
people are sitting at home with nothing to do. And then the other big factor is going to lead us into our next topic here pretty nicely is the explosion in work from home measures that are being implemented
Yes.
by employers.
Yeah.
So basically, the cold hard truth of it is that unless you absolutely have to, as a business, you are not shutting down. And like that's a good thing. It's good for the business owners, it's good for if they're big enough businesses, it's good for their shareholders, and it's good for the employees. People want to work. Like
Yeah.
my staff is not coming to me and saying, "Hey, I'd really like to get laid off right about now." No, honestly, I mean, I think some people have this perception that like if there's a government handout that people would like to take that. But we absolutely are working on something. In fact, I think there was some news about that today. What was it, like $1,000 or something like that? I don't know, whatever.
I don't know.
It was supposed to be for people who are impacted by the COVID-19 outbreak. But there's literally no one on my staff that's like, yeah, I sure would like to not have a job, and I'd sure like that government handout if I can have it. So, our goal as a business is to be as operational as we possibly can, and all while keeping other people safe. So we've probably got a good. Vaughn, what percentage of people are actually in the office right now? A third, maybe.
No one from Floatplane for sure.
Yeah, no one from Floatplane's there. If you count those guys, we're probably closer to like a quarter. Yeah, so basically the only people in office are the studio management guys. So Tyler and Matthias are in because they need to actually physically move things around. We don't have any of our regular shooters in right now because Brandon's on vacation, and I think he could have been like, oh, you know what, you guys are kind of short-staffed. I could probably not take the vacation, but the flip side of that is he had his vacation booked, and that's a perfect opportunity to quarantine yourself for 2 weeks. So like, he's been hanging around at home as far as I can tell. David's out self-quarantined. He got a note. Sorry. Why would I not? I'm not. Why does it matter? Oh, I guess so. Okay, well, whatever. So the point is, everyone's out. Um, and the only people who are in are we've got some of the editors in. We've actually been experimenting though with people editing from home, which I didn't
Okay.
think was going to be possible, but this is kind of crazy. We've got a video that's going to be coming out about this. Do you know Parsec?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar, Parsec, okay, you know what? Hold on. Before I transition to this topic, I do want to finish up with this. Basically, yeah, there's an explosion in work from home measures, which is a combination of remote access to files or to desktops, file sharing that's being done sort of over the internet rather than over a local network.
Yeah.
And then another big one is video conferencing. So who is it? Shoot, I forget. Is it Zoom? I think it's
Zoom.
Zoom was saying that their user base just like absolutely freaking exploded overnight. Um, so it's having a significant impact. So I think we had positioned in the title and thumbnail of this video, YouTube degrading quality as like it might be some kind of a bad or outrageous thing. But actually, it's fantastic because as long as people don't care enough to click a like one click, two clicks is all it takes for them to change the quality. So if they don't care enough to make 2 clicks, then they can significantly decrease the amount of bandwidth that they're consuming, and that gives us an opportunity to have better internet for people who need it more, like people who are working from home or offices that are trying to coordinate remote workers.
Yeah, I know from my experience trying to work on this. I mean, most of the float plane stuff is just fine. All we really do collaboratively in terms of videos talking to each other is we do like meetings twice a week, and those have been not really impacted. I didn't expect they would be. But my dad's thing and his school, I've worked on a Discord server for them, and we set up it's actually kind of a cool setup. Every teacher has their own category, and that category has like a few different text channels and a few different voice channels, and they all have interesting permissions and everything set up so that you get like enrolled in a class when you join the Discord server, and then you get access to just that channel and blah blah blah. But getting streaming working for them was a hurdle because they're not like Twitch streamers. They're
Right.
plumbing instructors. So that
Right.
was, and they've like never heard of Discord before other than my dad. Um, and all this other kind of stuff. But they've been picking it up, and we ended up figuring out that like even though you can stream your screen or your camera or whatever, Discord is fairly limited in terms of like having multiple things on screen and whatnot.
Right.
So I've had them start. I had them all install OBS, and even though I don't think you can stream through Discord with OBS, but I used that as like a canvas program. So they were able to lay out their screen and then full screen projector source their whole scene and then capture their screen, if that makes sense.
So this is interesting. The chat is basically exploding with people saying that they are limited to 720p. Are you guys talking about the stream we're on right now, or are you guys talking about YouTube in general?
That's
So let us know,
so
guys. Let us know, all right?
Twitch is limited to 720p right now, but that's the source. So I think you're streaming in 720p.
Oh, okay. It doesn't say that I am, which is weird. So I just checked. I saw that, and so I decided to check the OBS settings, and it's definitely set to. Oh, oh, I don't have rescale output checked, but it says 1920 by 1080 next to that. You know what? I didn't. I didn't. Oh yeah, okay. It's because I created a new profile and it's seven. It was in 720p. Remember when I had to change
Yeah.
the streaming
Yeah.
settings? All right, sorry about that, guys. Yes, this is a 720p stream today. All right, yeah. So don't worry about it. It's all good. That's not YouTube wide. That's just yet another thing that went wrong with the stream today. All right, so let's talk about some other remote work options or some other remote work stuff. One of the things that we've been experimenting with is Parsec. So for those of you who are not familiar, Parsec is a company that's really focused on remote gaming. So that's a space that's really exploding right now. You've got NVIDIA with their GeForce Now. You've got Sony's offering. You've got Microsoft, Project xCloud. You've got, who else did we? Oh yeah, Google with Stadia. And then And then, of course, you've got some of the more kitschy niche ones. We actually got a ton of criticism in our recent roundup of game streaming service for not including ShadowTech, and I feel like it must have gotten cut in the edit or something because we did mention them, but we had decided not to include them in a roundup of these game streaming services because we really felt that ShadowTech was almost a different category of game streaming service, not that similar to something like a GeForce Now or especially a Google Stadia. So what ShadowTech is a virtualized desktop, um, and basically what they're running is they're, if I recall correctly, they're taking each box, which has many CPU cores and then multiple GPUs, and then much like we did with 7 gamers, 1 CPU, or 6 workstations, 1 CPU, they're cordoning off those resources. So every one of these virtual gaming rigs gets its own GPU and then a segment or a chunk of the CPU cores. Um, and then what you do is whenever you want a game, you can use any device you want, whether it's like an Android phone or Android TV even, or a laptop, and then you remote into that virtual desktop and you use the performance of that virtual desktop in order to play your games or edit video or whatever the case may be. All right, so there's a reason I'm telling this whole story. Anyway, maybe we should do a follow-up where we check out ShadowTech compared to these other solutions. But what's different about it is that when you log into a shadow box, you're basically just looking at like a desktop. You have to like install your own games and stuff. Like there's no like pretty launcher and stuff like that. You're just using a computer. It just happens to be, you know, 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away or whatever the case may be. So we didn't really consider it to be a proper mainstream game streaming service. Also, anecdotally, I've heard that their wait list to get a shadow box is like 6 months or something like that. And every time we mention it, apparently it gets really, really bad. So if it wasn't 6 months, it probably will be again now that we've just mentioned it on WAN Show. Because when we did our sponsored video for them a while back, apparently they just were buried for like actually months in requests because there's a limit to how much data center space that you can get and how quickly you can scale up. Like there's cash flow considerations. So back to Parsec. Parsec is kind of like ShadowTech, except that instead of remoting into their data center to use a machine, you remote into your own computer to use it remotely. So totally different from like a GeForce Now or Google Stadia because you actually have to own the hardware, but it's like ShadowTech in that you are able to access it remotely and use it as though you're sitting in front of it. And Parsec, like ShadowTech, has really put a lot of emphasis on a couple of things. Number one is keeping their latency as low as possible. And number two is working on both absolute and relative mouse movements and making sure that they are translated correctly across this over internet access connection. So what that means, I actually had to ask what that meant. I was familiar with the concept, but I didn't know the terms. So absolute mouse movement refers to when you move your mouse and your pointer moves corresponding to it. And then when you pick up your pointer, it like stays there. Okay, relative mouse, or when you let go, it stays where it is. Relative mouse movement refers to when you're like rotating an object within a CAD program or you are gaming, where your mouse pointer is actually sort of virtually centered in the screen, and then you're just like panning around. And it's so that movement is relative to its starting point, not that it stays there. Does that kind of make sense? Was that a good enough explanation, Luke?
Yeah, yeah, I'm
Okay,
following.
cool. So anyway, as it turns out, a bunch of the work that Parsec has done to make it great for gaming also happens to make it great for video editors or 3D designers or people who work in game studios who are working on animations or modeling. So I thought that was pretty cool. They actually just rolled out a professional level service, and it's got not much going for it right now, actually. So you have to pay for it per seat, and then you have the ability to have multiple monitors, but only by switching between them. And like TeamViewer can already do that, but TeamViewer is much laggier. Like it's a totally different experience. Um, so you could have multiple monitors, and then there's like administrative stuff. So an administrator can determine who has access to which stations and things like that. So it's but it's fundamentally the same technology, and we actually have tried using it for remote video editing, and it's not color accurate enough. Like you would still need to do a local. You'd have to like take your finished project and do a passive color correction, or you'd have to have one person at a central location that's like your colorist for all of your video projects. But in terms of the responsiveness, it's basically the ping time between you and the server, which because our office happens to be like crazy fast and like a super high tier, low latency connection, is pretty good for all of our workers who happen to be in the Vancouver area, plus about a frame. So that's your total latency. So it's pretty work withable. It's not perfect, but yeah, we're gonna have a video coming about that. What have you guys done to make remote working easier? I mean, you've got remote people already, so I guess it hasn't been much of an adjustment.
Yeah, I was gonna say everyone went home and then they kept doing their jobs. There wasn't a lot of adapting. I yeah, that's pretty much it. Everyone was already set up to be able
Right.
to work at home. It was extremely not an issue. It took maybe less than a fifth of a day for one or two people to adjust, and then that was about it.
Okay,
Our
so
side is pretty simple.
here's the big question is, will this experience change anything about the way that you work moving forward? And I'd love to hear from people in the chat as well.
In my opinion, no. We've already been set up at Floatplane for a hybrid of remote work and local work. We have already set a precedence that it's okay, but preferred for you to be in locally. And I still think, like I've seen a lot of posts going out about like, oh, they said working from home was impossible, and look what's happening now. It's like, well, no, it was extremely unreasonable given that it was fine to come in and work locally. And I would still prefer that everyone is local.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think anything's going to really change in that regard. Um, yeah, this was in terms of the difficulty of switching how we work. This was extremely light touch for Flowplane because Flowplane was extremely well set up for this already.
Right. Oh, okay. People are complaining about the volume levels. Okay, don't worry, guys. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I turned Luke down. I turned me up. Sorry about that. I mean, for me, man, I don't know. The thing about video production is a lot of things work a lot better when you're in person. And one of the things that I get a lot of feedback that people like about working at LMG is like people don't like the commute. We have people who live in Vancouver and are commuting all the way out to Cloverdale, which is not great. But I've had multiple people, without me prompting, bring up in their annual reviews last time around that one of the great things about LMG is that they could go for a beer with literally anyone on staff. And, you know, depending who it is, they might not be BFFs or whatever, but like it'd be a good time, be all
Yeah.
good. And I feel like it'd be really hard to have that level of camaraderie and that kind of a team dynamic if you're not in the same place, doing the same stuff, seeing each other's faces, you know?
It takes work, and like honestly, a decent part of the reason why we have those two meetings, the Monday and Friday meeting, is so that everyone at least hears each other twice a week.
Right.
And I'm not even kidding. Like there's been a not insignificant amount of those meetings that at the end of the day probably didn't need to happen.
Right.
But they don't take that long. They're all pretty short unless there's like a big discussion that needs to happen and we needed the meeting anyways. But if that isn't there, they're all pretty short, and at least everyone checks in with each other. There's that vocal check-in because I know sometimes there's a lot of loss in translation when it comes to just communicating through text.
Oh yeah, especially if English isn't everyone's first language. Like I know you've got people overseas and like
Yep.
sometimes and people not overseas, people in Canada. We have other languages in Canada.
Yeah, and different cultures.
Yeah.
There's different approaches to
We have multiple
problems.
cultures in Canada.
Yes, yeah. And there's tonal shifts and expectations
Yeah.
in terms of communication that happens differently based on different cultures. So one culture might think that a certain form of communication, even if the language medium is the same, if they're both speaking English, they might think that a certain form of communication is very respectful. Meanwhile, different culture might think that that exact form of communication is notably offensive in some way.
Yeah, like
So
boomers, for example. Have you noticed they put ellipses on everything? Like every time my parents text me, I'm like, you know how ominous this sounds, right? Like, have you noticed that?
yeah, yeah, and the single K,
Yeah, yeah,
the single
K
K
with
is always
ellipses. I'm
scary.
like, you know what that means, right? That means it's not okay.
Yeah.
That means the very opposite of okay,
Yeah.
but they don't seem to get it at all.
Yeah. So like it often helps to bridge those communication issues by getting people in voice, because tonality can change so much of the conversation, because you can just hear in someone's voice if they're like pissed or not.
And
And if
part of
they're
it, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
and if you add video on top of that, that can
Yeah.
often be helpful to another level. It might not be another level that's really beneficial or helpful, depending on how kind of adapted your team is at this point, how much time they spent together, if they get each other yet or not. But like if we were to bring a new member on the team right now, I would probably push at least the majority of the team to try to have video enabled in meetings
Yeah.
for the first little while, just so that you can see body language on top of tonality.
Well, part of
Uh,
it too is like a social credit, not like China's social credit system, but I I mean like an interpersonal relationship type of credit. Like if you, as a company, you all go like paintballing together and everyone has a blast, the next
yeah.
time someone butts heads at work, you're gonna have a little bit of like goodwill in the bank
Yes.
to make
Yeah.
it easier for that to not escalate into something really nasty. You know, when people have those kinds of, yeah, man, good times, good times. When people have that to fall back on, I feel like it helps a lot. And it's hard to do that not in person. I mean, gaming's great, but it's not quite the same either. Like,
Yeah.
we've had you and the girlfriend over for, and we end up like sitting and playing video games, and like that was a ton of fun. And the game that we were playing, Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time, there's absolutely no reason, whether it's through Steam or through a service like Parsec, for example, which is also like a local, it's like internet local multiplayer is one of the things they specialize in. There's no reason we couldn't have played that game from separate locations, and we could still do that, actually. It's not a terrible idea. Maybe we should play some more of that game. Anyway, but it's more about just like getting together and hanging out.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to take a couple comments from viewers. So Alex Shepard says my company is already talking about maybe not going back. Probably by the time the COVID crisis subsides, about 80% of our company won't be in the office. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me that much.
It's a
Just
reasonable conclusion. Sometimes what needs to happen is necessity for something to change. So like it might not have been worth the work to swap that over for a long time, and then you have to suddenly, and now it's like, well, because I have to, it's inherently worth the work. So now we can switch to this
yep.
new mode.
And now it might
Uh,
even be more work to go back the other way.
yeah, yeah. And
It's been
and the company might be able to save a significant amount of money by reducing office space or whatever else.
Yeah, and not just that, but there's like an overall benefit to people as well. Like, have you noticed when you have had to go out, how little traffic there is?
Oh yeah.
When I was commuting last week before I got like a bit of a, I don't even have a sore throat. It's not sore at all. I just have like a bit of a, like kind of a bit of a occasional wet cough. Like I've coughed once this entire WAN show, and like my voice is low. Like I feel otherwise 100% fine, but I'm just like, yeah, I clearly can't be in the office right now. Even just the optics of it. Even if I
Yeah.
went and got tested and they were like, no, it's not COVID-19, just the optics of being at work sick right now is just terrible. So I've been working from home. But when I was commuting last week, I've been getting to the office in 15 minutes. Normally it takes me like a third longer than that. I haven't even, and no, I see
Wow.
the look on your face. No, 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 not because I've got my foot on the accelerator. There's just no traffic.
Yeah,
There's no traffic. Nobody's out on the road.
it's kind of crazy. I've been talking for a long time. You and I have had this conversation before about like future cities and like working and in-person communication and stuff might look like in the future, because the current state of these like places in the world that are hyper hubs of human population, with super 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 expensive land and rent and all that kind of stuff. It's, I mean, I guess it's relatively sustainable, but it would be way easier if people were able to spread out. But with
Yes.
the need to communicate into these dense areas, people usually want to pack in like crazy because employers want access to more potential high skilled employees.
Yes.
So you want to put your office somewhere where there's lots of people and then everything
And where
crams together.
where your, dick feels the biggest as well. That's another
Yeah.
thing that really like annoys me. Like, there is no reason why, both sports stadiums in Vancouver need to be in downtown Vancouver. Put them somewhere else. I mean, when the Olympics came to town, they were like, okay, let's put the skating oval in Richmond, and let's put this stuff over here, and let's put that stuff over there. Yeah, yeah, why not? What a novel idea.
Just put it at the end of a train track
Yeah, and I mean,
or
I
part
get
way
it.
and then you're
I
good.
get it. That's the entertainment district or whatever, and there's lots of restaurants around there and stuff. You know what? Those restaurants still going to be there. And if you go and you put a sports arena somewhere else, the restaurants will probably come. I mean, isn't that what city planners do? Isn't that their job? And at
Yeah.
least if you were somewhere else, everyone who needs to get to work or get home from work on a game night would actually be able to do it. That would be cool because there's much larger arteries, and I mean road arteries. There's much larger arteries kind of outside the city because they're designed to bring people into and out from the city. But yeah, that's a whole separate conversation. Chad Lafarge says, at my job, everyone, not just the tech guys, are going agile. So people are doing 15-minute stand-ups who work in finance or compliance.
Cool.